Well, it probably won't surprise listeners. They're going to private companies. So the government is giving states money to then fund private companies adding electric chargers. So we see them going to gas stations like Love's and Sheetz, which I'm a Sheetz fan, so that's cool, but it's a private company. We also see it going to places like Waffle House and other restaurants and hotels. So they're paying these private companies to install these electric vehicle chargers in these locations across the state.
So, I mean, do you feel like taxpayer money should be going to support electric vehicle infrastructure in a community or a state if they don't have demand for it?
So I would say no. I would say specifically this program, like I said, which is not looking at where is their demand, where do we need these electric chargers. It is just giving states a lump sum of money every single year that is predictable. So I would say that we should be looking where is their demand.
Americans are capable of achieving extraordinary things when they have the freedom and opportunity to do so. This is American Potential.
Hey everyone, welcome to the American Potential Podcast. I'm your host, David Fromm. Today's episode is the next in our Big Ideas for Smaller Government series. As Elon Musk's Doge team is going through and finding things to cut, we are doing the same with this series, and our goal is to cut $2 trillion. As we go through our ideas, we would like to hear what your ideas are, and you can submit them at dogeidea.com. That's DOGE idea.com. We are looking at the Department of Transportation and this year's annual budget of $145 billion. But let's take a step back and talk about how the department was created. Back in 1966, President Lyndon B. Johnson saw what he called the growing complexity of America's railways, roads, and airways, and decided the federal government needed to help with the nation's transportation infrastructure. That's how the Department of Transportation, or DOT, was born. And since then, it's had a huge impact on transportation policy, for better or worse. Investing in infrastructure is important, but let's be honest, big government solutions like Amtrak and federal highway programs haven't always lived up to their promises. What they have done is expand bureaucracy, increase spending, and concentrate power in Washington. Meanwhile, innovation has been coming from the private sector, and not because of government mandates. They've come from entrepreneurs, competition, and the free market despite a never-ending maze of regulations. So, with that brief history of DOT, I want to welcome our guest for today, Jeremiah Mosteller, who is a policy director for Americans for Prosperity and enjoys coming on and doing these episodes with us because he's one of our most frequent and favorite guests.
David, I'm so excited to be here. Thanks for having me again.
It's awesome. Great. Hey, since we're talking about transportation, I know you're a well-traveled man. Where's your favorite place to travel?
Yeah, anywhere with mountains. And I think specifically to give your listeners a great place they should go, there's a place on the border of Tennessee and North Carolina called Max Patch. It's a relatively flat but very high mountain with no trees. And so you can get a 360-degree view of all the mountains in Tennessee, North Carolina, Virginia. It is gorgeous. Yeah. I recommend anyone go visit that place.
Yeah, that's wonderful. Awesome.
What about you?
Oh man, anywhere at the ocean, to be honest with you. I love,
So we're opposite.
No,
you're the beach guy. Too. I'm the mountains guy.
Yeah. I live in the Midwest now. Grew up in the East Coast, so I have this longing to be at the beach. So, kind of maybe what I don't have. So, well, anyway, before we really dive in on this episode, is there anything that Elon's Doge team has reported that you really have been kind of surprised about?
Yeah, I mean, so what we've seen from the Doge team so far is pretty much what we expected. They're going through the agencies, they're identifying cuts, but I think we're starting to see that they're realizing that it's going to be a little harder than they initially expected without Congress stepping in and taking action as well. Probably the most interesting individual finding is that they found that there is a limestone mine in Pennsylvania where retirements for federal employees are processed manually in paper. So in this mine, they have just rows and rows and rows of filing cabinets with these individual files for each individual employee. So yes, in the year 2025, we are still processing retirements on paper. And David, I do want to add that so far they've found about $105 billion in cost savings as of the recording today. And it's not a competition, but I did want to note that at the end of the last episode, we found 5 times that amount of savings. So I'm hoping they'll catch up with us, but it's really interesting to see how we're a little ahead of them. So
yeah, all right, there you go. Well, all right, let's dive into the Department of Transportation. So they funded a program dealing with drones, of which we have one here. So what was that program?
Yeah, so this program is a larger grant program called the Smart Transportation Program. And in this case, the funding went to the Indiana Department of Transportation and Purdue Polytechnic Institute. And so this particular program is funding educating students on how to fly drones in the state of Indiana. And it's specifically going to a sub-department of the Department of Transportation there in the state that the leader of that agency or that department has said, hey, we want to make sure students understand this is not sci-fi, this is the future. And so they're just essentially, it's basically just trying to train students on how to fly drones.
Okay, cool. Now, are the students paying to learn this skill?
So it's a little unclear right now. We don't actually know from either the grant application or the public coverage of this, whether this money is going to help current existing students of 4-degree programs learn how to fly drones, or whether the Institute is going to build out a separate educational program that's more of like a certificate. But what we do know is the $2 million going to this program will only last for about 18 months. So if it is going to 4-year degree programs, we can expect that's not going to be many students that are going to be covered by this. So it's going to be a pretty high cost per student.
So so we're highlighting this as some kind of wasteful spending. Why do we feel like this is not really a good use of taxpayer funds?
Well, because training students on how to fly drones is nothing related to transportation, logistics, or anything else. What we see, this is a larger grant program, and all of the other grantees are kind of working on innovative car technologies, innovative public transit technologies, or logistics or infrastructure technologies. And so that larger grant program is going to things that seem to be more relevant to the Department of Transportation's mission.
Yeah. All right. Well, so we talk a lot about regulations. And in particular regulations that agencies have put in place. Is there one that really stands out to you that the Department of Transportation should get rid of?
Yeah, David, I was so excited that you were going to ask me this question today. Because we've been talking a lot about the cost savings component of DOGE, but DOGE is also looking at regulations and figuring out how do we streamline regulations for the American people. And so one that my team has specifically highlighted among the dozens and dozens that we've identified across agencies is a rule at the Department of Transportation around the fuel economy of vehicles. And so during the Biden administration, they sought to really jack up the requirements on car companies when it comes to how fuel efficient cars should be. And we've seen them actually multiple times pull back their regulations throughout the administration because they were too restrictive. But what we still see today is the regulations require fuel economy to go up on average 2% a year. That doesn't sound like a lot, and that actually sounds like a good thing. I want a more fuel-efficient vehicle. I'm sure you do as well. But what we actually see, if you dig into the agency's reports around this regulation, it's going to cost American consumers and society on net billions of dollars in additional costs.
Right.
And so that is very concerning from our perspective, that what we're seeing is the cost-benefit analysis just is not playing out there.
Well, you know, whenever we have that conversation about more and more fuel-efficient vehicles, like, yeah, I would hope that innovation and technology would be able to continue to do that, because all of us want to spend less money and also maybe be good stewards of the environment. But it always strikes me that the people who are least able to afford that more and more efficient vehicle are the people who can least afford everything, because they don't have as much money. It's the poorer folks, it's the working class folks. And then like we put more and more standards on them. And so, yeah, a wealthy person living in the suburbs of Virginia here can go out and get that super new fuel efficient car. But the person who, you know, doesn't have discretionary income to do that, or like they're just happy to try to keep their current car from 2005 running because they got to get to their job and all that. I mean, that to me, it's just so tone deaf for policymakers to make that, you know, a centerpiece and to try to pass that and shove that down people's throats. And yet we see that all over the place. We see it at the state level too. So and I know the Department of Transportation has been one of the main implementers of that.
Yeah, and David, we're not saying that we don't want cars to be more fuel efficient. There are market incentives already in place. There are consumer demands that have continued to push up the fuel efficiency of vehicles. All we're saying is we want the Trump administration to step in and make those requirements more reasonable. Let's not result in billions of additional costs for consumers. Let's make sure that the cost and benefit are a little more equal to what we would expect to achieving those gains in technology.
Yeah. So we've talked about what DOT has spent taxpayer dollars on. Now let's talk about how to save some of those dollars. So what subsidies, one of our favorite topics, should DOT look at stopping? And all of them could be the answer.
Yeah. David, I think there's two programs that I would specifically highlight for listeners. The first was one that we've previously talked about actually in the intro episode, which was the low and no emissions bus program, which we had talked about has been used for some very interesting purposes, including a bus simulator in Arkansas and a park and ride lot in Colorado that is hours away from any major city. So it's a little confusing why you need a park and ride lot there. So that's one of the programs. And I think the other one that I would highlight and would love to talk a little bit more in depth about is there are multiple programs currently that DOT runs to subsidize EV charging infrastructure. And we think that those programs, while EV charging might be a good thing in places where the demand is there, we shouldn't be subsidizing it blanket across the board in every single part of the country.
Yeah, makes sense. Those subsidies, I think they create some of the craziest stories that, shows like ours love to highlight. But, a park and ride in the middle of nowhere in Colorado is, everybody likes to park and ride. Yeah. But I think the goal is to get somewhere when you're trying to do it. Well, all right. So moving on. So there's two joint Department of Energy and DOT programs. What are these programs and what results have they produced for us?
Yeah, so the first program is called the National Electric Vehicle Infrastructure Formula Grant Program. Yes, that is a mouthful. I know that. This one is a program that is structured so that each state is getting essentially a set predictable amount of money every single year to build out charging infrastructure. And the requirements of the program require them to build it 50 miles apart, fill in any gaps, those types of things. So far, this program, I would say, has been difficult to implement, is probably the way I would put it. States started receiving money in 2022. We've seen that it's taken them about 2 years on average to then announce where they're going to build that infrastructure, even though they can actually look at a chart on the Department of Transportation's website and see right now how much money they're going to get in 2026. So they could pre-plan. They have chosen not to do that and are waiting 2 years to then announce the infrastructure. So we see that only 8 of the 50 states that are receiving money have announced any chargers under this program today. And it's interesting. I dug into Virginia because that's where I live and that's where we are today to kind of see where are these chargers going? Let's see where they've announced they're going. Well, it probably won't surprise listeners. They're going to private companies. So the government is giving states money to then fund private companies adding electric chargers. So we see them going to gas stations like Love's and Sheetz, which I'm a Sheetz fan, so that's cool, but it's a private company. We also see it going to places like Waffle House and other restaurants and hotels. So they're paying these private companies to install these electric vehicle chargers in these locations across the state. So, yeah.
So, do you feel like taxpayer money should be going to support electric vehicle infrastructure in a community or a state if they don't have demand for it?
So I would say no. I would say specifically this program, like I said, which is not looking at where is their demand, where do we need these electric chargers? It is just giving states a lump sum of money every single year that is predictable. So I would say that we should be looking where is their demand before we would let's set aside whether the government is going to do this or not. But if we're going to say the government is going to do this, the government should be looking where is their demand, not just hey, let's give all of the states money. I think, for example, you mentioned Northern Virginia being a wealthy place. I drive around here all the time and see electric vehicles everywhere. So clearly there is a market demand and there's a lot of people wanting these vehicles. But when I go home to small town North Carolina, Lincolnton, North Carolina, I see 0 electric vehicles. But you see electric chargers popping up in places in this town. Well, when you dig into it, you realize, oh, this is being subsidized by the federal or state government to build out these electric chargers where there is 0 demand. And so I think listeners would probably agree. Yeah. If we are going to subsidize this, we should be investing the resources where there's the demand, not in places where there is no demand. And it is worth flagging the second program is a competitive discretionary program that the DOT runs. So there are duplicate programs, one that is based on states getting a lump sum every year, one that is more focused on like, hey, where is there a demand? Where is there a desire to have these chargers? And so DOT is also, in addition to giving the lump sum, also funding those as well. And so between the two programs, we know in November, the last update, that there have been about 214 chargers built So we're spending billions of dollars on these programs, and they've built 214 chargers between both programs so far. And I want to be clear to listeners, that's individual chargers, not individual locations where there's chargers.
Oh, wow.
So if a location has 6 to 12 chargers, they're counting all of those, not counting the specific places where these chargers are located.
Yeah, I mean, just my experience with working with government over a few decades is that I think a lot of times folks in government will measure the wrong thing also. So it's like, well, we got this money to do this, and then the success is that we put X number of chargers out there. Well, the reality is like, no, we should, if we made a decision as a society to spend taxpayer money on this, it should be, are we meeting the needs of the places we need them, so that it's driven by demand and need. But like so often it's just like, well, we just did this many, and that's a success, and that's not success. Actually, it's often a waste of taxpayers' money.
I couldn't agree more, David. I mean, I think our perspective is that the private sector and local communities know better where these chargers are needed than some bureaucrat sitting in an office in Washington, D.C.
Yeah, somehow I think that's become a bit of a refrain for us. Mm-hmm. All right. So if we add these cuts that you've identified today with the Department of Transportation, and we add them to the cuts that we've already made in this series, what is our total up to?
Well, David, this brings some significant cost savings. So if we saw the low and no emission bus program cut, that's $2.3 billion. If we see the 2 EV charging programs cut, that's $2.9 billion. So for our total savings so far this season, we're going to go up to $547.5 billion. So we're making some progress there.
Wow.
So we are above a quarter of our goal now in this series already, which is super exciting.
That is exciting.
Yeah.
Well, we have episodes to come, I hope.
That's right.
That we'll identify more and get even closer. So if our listeners would like to share some of their ideas about what should be cut, where do you think they can do that?
Yeah, I mean, we would love to hear directly from them. They should go to dogeidea.com, share their ideas with us. We can talk about them on this podcast. We will also be elevating those to members of Congress and administration officials, because we believe the best ideas come from our activists and from average Americans, not from bureaucrats in Washington. And so we want to have the chance to elevate those ideas.
Amen, brother. That's great.
Yeah.
It's always a lot of fun having you here. So thank you so much for coming on, teach us a little bit about the Department of Transportation. Again, if you would like to share what you think should be cut, be sure to go to dogeidea.com. That's dogeidea.com. If you would like to stay connected with the podcast, and please do, be sure to like and subscribe to our channel. And always remember, liberty and freedom are easily taken for granted. Don't take it for granted. Go out there and defend liberty and freedom. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you on the next episode.
Thank you for listening to American Potential. You may listen to more stories from Americans working every day to expand freedom and opportunity in their communities by visiting AmericanPotential.com.